The first time a dangerous man touched me, he didn't pull me closer because he wanted me. He did it because someone else in the room already had. My shift at Bellamy's was supposed to end at 11 p.m., and I had been counting down every minute since 8:30, when my feet started aching through my black non-slip shoes and the smile on my face began to feel borrowed. Friday nights in Midtown always brought the same kind of crowd: men with watches that cost more than my Honda, women with polished voices and sharper eyes, everyone pretending they weren't measuring each other by money, power, or who got seated closest to the private lounge. I was 24, 2 semesters away from finishing nursing school, and running on cold brew, stubbornness, and exactly 4 hours of sleep. None of that was unusual. What was unusual was the phone. It was lying face down near the end of booth 12, half hidden under a folded linen napkin, black case. No lock screen glow, no buzzing, no sound. I only noticed it because I was wiping the table after a pair of men in tailored coats got up too fast, leaving their drinks half full and their conversation unfinished. I should have dropped the phone and lost and found and kept moving. Instead, I picked it up. The screen lit for 1 second, long enough for me to see a message preview that made my stomach go tight. Thursday. Warehouse 4. No mistakes this time. Then the screen went dark again. I stared at my reflection in the blank glass, my own green eyes looking wider than they had a second ago. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a business deal, maybe a movie reference, maybe my exhausted brain turning ordinary words into something sinister because I'd had too much caffeine and not enough peace. But when I looked up, one of the men was standing across the dining room watching me. Not waving. Not smiling. Just watching. I put the phone in my apron pocket and suddenly forgot how to breathe like a normal person. Bellamy's had floor-to-ceiling windows, amber lighting, white tablecloths, and a pianist in the corner making everything sound softer than it was. But in that moment, the whole restaurant felt wrong. Too warm. Too quiet. Too polished to hide. The tension humming underneath it. I grabbed a tray I didn't need and headed toward the service station, trying not to walk too fast. That was when I noticed the second man near the bar. Also watching me. Different suit. Same expression. My pulse started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I told myself not to panic. Don't make it weird. Don't make yourself interesting. Just keep moving. Just smile. Just survive the shift and go home. Then I passed the VIP corner and felt a hand close lightly, but firmly, around my wrist. I turned, breath catching, already halfway to an apology, and found myself looking into the calmest blue eyes I had ever seen. He was seated like he owned not just the table but the air around it. Dark suit. Dark hair. Expensive watch. The kind of face people trusted before they understood they shouldn't. He didn't let go right away. He just looked at me once like he'd already made a decision, and leaned in close enough for his voice to reach only me. "Don't look behind you," he murmured. "Smile. You're in danger. Pretend I'm your boyfriend." I smiled because he told me to, but every muscle in my face felt stiff and wrong, like my body knew before my mind did that something had shifted and there was no way to shift it back. His hand slid from my wrist to the small of my back with practiced ease, careful enough not to startle me and certain enough to make the gesture look real. Up close, he smelled faintly of cedar and expensive cologne, clean and restrained, nothing loud, nothing careless. The pianist was still playing somewhere behind me. Glasses still clinked. Waiters still moved between tables with polished smiles. But I could feel the eyes on us now, and I knew the room had changed even if nobody else would have said it out loud. "Good," he said under his breath, his expression barely moving. "Keep looking at me." I swallowed. "Who are you?" His mouth curved into something that looked warm from a distance and dangerous from where I was standing. "Right now, I am the reason they are hesitating." He turned his head slightly and brushed an invisible piece of lint from my sleeve, the kind of intimate gesture that made the act believable. Anyone watching would have seen a handsome man paying attention to his girlfriend. Anyone close enough to hear us would have known I was one heartbeat away from falling apart. "My name," he said quietly, "is Adrian Russo." The name hit me with no immediate meaning, but the tone around us changed anyway. A server passing with a tray slowed for half a second when she saw him, then looked away so fast it made my stomach tighten. Adrian noticed everything. I could tell that instantly. The room. The exits. The men watching me. The way my right hand kept drifting toward my apron pocket where the phone suddenly felt as heavy as a brick. His eyes dropped there for a fraction of a second, then rose back to mine. "You picked something up that does not belong to you," he said. "Do not touch it. Do not mention it. And whatever happens next, do not argue with me in public." "Public?" I whispered. "You say that like there is going to be a private part." "There will be if you want to leave here safely." My heart gave a hard, painful beat. I should have pulled away. I should have called my manager or security, or maybe 911 if I had been thinking clearly, but nothing about the men near the bar or the calm in Adrian's voice suggested this was a situation ordinary people could fix with ordinary numbers. One of the men started moving toward us. He was not rushing. That made it worse. He walked with the confidence of someone who expected access, expected compliance, expected the world to open when he came near it. Adrian's thumb pressed lightly against my waist, just once, a warning or reassurance, I could not tell which. Then he looked at me with such convincing familiarity that for one wild second I almost believed we had known each other longer than 30 seconds. "There you are," he said, loud enough to carry. "I was beginning to think you were avoiding me." The words were smooth, playful, perfectly pitched for the room. My brain scrambled to catch up. "I had tables," I managed, and was absurdly proud that my voice came out steady. "You always have tables." His gaze held mine, and I saw approval flicker there before it vanished. The approaching man stopped 3 feet away. "Mr. Russo," he said, polite on the surface, something colder underneath. "I did not realize you were entertaining company." Adrian did not even glance at him right away. He reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, a gesture so gentle it made my breath catch for a completely different reason. Then he looked at the man and smiled without warmth. "Then consider yourself updated." For one suspended second, nobody moved. The man standing in front of us was well dressed, maybe early 40s, with a polished smile that never reached his eyes. He looked like the kind of man who made people uncomfortable without ever raising his voice. I felt Adrian's hand remain steady at my waist, not tightening, not slipping, just there. A silent instruction to stay exactly where I was. "Of course," the man said finally, his gaze shifting to me with mild curiosity that felt anything but mild. "I did not know you were bringing guests tonight." Adrian's expression did not change. "I do not usually announce my plans." The man gave a short nod, as if that answered something larger than the words themselves. Clearly. His eyes dropped to my name tag, and I resisted the urge to cover it with my hand. "Chloe," he read. "A pleasure." Did not feel like one. "I should get back to work," I said, because it was the only normal sentence I could think of, and normal suddenly felt like the most valuable thing in the world. Adrian turned his head just enough to look at me, and there was something almost amused in his eyes, as if he respected the attempt even while rejecting it. "No," he said lightly, loud enough for the other man to hear. "You are off for the night." I stared at him. "I am what?" "You are leaving with me." The man in front of us smiled again, slower this time. "That seems sudden." Adrian finally looked at him directly. "Not to me." The silence that followed was thin as glass. Then the man stepped back with a small motion of surrender that somehow did not feel like surrender at all. "Enjoy your evening, Mr. Russo." He tipped his head to me. "Miss Bennett." Hearing my last name from a stranger's mouth made cold travel down my spine. He walked away, without hurry, disappearing into the crowd near the bar, and I realized with a sick twist in my stomach that he had known exactly who I was before he ever looked at my tag. "How does he know my name?" I whispered. Adrian lifted his hand from my waist only long enough to reach for the tray I was still holding in a death grip. He set it on the table behind him with smooth efficiency, then leaned closer, his voice dropping again. "Because the moment you touched that phone, people started asking questions about you. That does not explain anything. It explains enough for now. For you, maybe." My pulse was racing so hard I could hear it. "I do not even know what is happening. I wait tables. I take orders. I refill water. That is the full extent of my criminal resume." For the first time, something real flickered across his face. Not humor exactly. More like restrained approval. "Good," he murmured. "Hold on to that voice. You are going to need it." Before I could answer, A woman in a sleek black dress appeared at Adrian's side. She had an earpiece, sharp cheekbones, and the posture of someone who missed nothing. "Car is ready," she said quietly. Adrian nodded once. "Thank you, Lena." Then he looked back at me. "We are leaving through the service corridor." "We?" I echoed. "You made this problem mine the second you stood next to me," he said. "And I made it survivable." I should have argued. I should have demanded my phone, my purse, my paycheck, my ordinary life back. Instead, I glanced across the dining room and saw the man from before standing near the bar again, speaking to the second man who had been watching me earlier. Both of them looked calm. That was what finally frightened me. Not anger. Not chaos. Calm. People who believed they still had time. Adrian saw the exact moment my fear turned from confusion into belief. He held out his hand, not forcing, not pleading, just waiting. Around us, Bellamy's still glittered under soft amber light. The pianist kept playing. Someone laughed near the windows. A bottle of wine was uncorked 2 tables away. The whole world kept pretending this was a normal Friday night. I slipped my hand into his because suddenly, pretending seemed like the only thing keeping me alive. Adrian's fingers closed around mine, warm and certain. "Do not look back," he said. "And whatever you hear behind us, keep walking." The service corridor behind Bellamy's looked nothing like the dining room. Gone were the amber lights, the polished marble, the soft piano music pretending the world was gentle. Back here everything was stainless steel, pale tile, fluorescent light, and the sharp mixed smell of dish soap, coffee grounds, and bread still warm from the ovens. My hand was still in Adrian's, and the contrast between his tailored calm and the chaos pounding in my chest felt almost unreal. He moved quickly but never looked hurried, guiding me past stacked trays, linen carts, and swinging kitchen doors as if he had memorized every inch of the building years ago. "How do you know this place so well?" I whispered. "I make it a point to know every exit in any room I enter," he said. "That is not a normal answer." "Neither is tonight." Lena walked several steps ahead of us, one hand near the discreet radio clipped beneath her jacket, her pace efficient and silent. She pushed open a gray security door at the end of the corridor and held it for us without a word. Beyond it was a narrower hallway with concrete walls and exposed pipes overhead, the kind of hidden space customers never saw and staff barely noticed. My heartbeat echoed there like footsteps. "I need my bag," I said suddenly. "My phone charger is in it. My wallet too." Adrian did not slow down. "You will get what you need." "That is not what I said." He glanced at me then, and the look in his eyes stopped the protest forming in my throat. Not because it was cold, but because it was steady in a way panic could not survive. "Chloe, listen to me carefully. In the next 5 minutes, I need you to decide whether you want to be right or safe." I hated that those sounded like different things. I hated more that he might be right. We reached a steel door with a keypad beside it. Lena punched in 6 digits so fast I barely saw her fingers move. The lock clicked. She opened it, revealing a small underground loading bay washed in dim white light. A black SUV waited near the curb, engine running, windows dark, clean enough to reflect the overhead bulbs like still water. 2 men in dark coats stood beside it, watchful without looking theatrical, the kind of men who could disappear into any crowd until you needed them not to. Adrian released my hand only to rest his palm between my shoulder blades, guiding me forward. The touch was light, but after the panic of the last 15 minutes it grounded me more than I wanted to admit. "Get in," he said. I stopped short. "No," he paused with me. Lena turned halfway around, clearly listening without interfering. "No," Adrian repeated. "I do not get into SUVs with strangers in underground garages. That feels like a rule with excellent survival statistics." Something almost like approval touched his face again. "A smart rule. Then we agree." "No," he said softly. "We do not." He stepped closer, lowering his voice until the words felt private even in that open concrete space. "If I wanted to frighten you, Chloe, I would not waste time pretending otherwise. I am telling you the truth because truth moves faster than comfort. The men upstairs are not finished asking about you. In less than 10 minutes, Bellamy's security footage will be reviewed. In less than 20, your address, school, work history, and everyone attached to your name will start becoming very interesting to the wrong people." My mouth went dry. That phone was just a message preview. And now it is a reason. I looked at the SUV, then back toward the closed steel door behind us as if normal life might still be waiting on the other side. It was not. I could feel that now. The hallway, the loading bay, the low hum of the engine, the way Adrian never once checked whether danger was real because he already knew it was. All of it had the heavy shape of something I could not undo. Where are you taking me? I asked. Somewhere they cannot reach you tonight. Tonight. One problem at a time. I should have hated how controlled that sounded. Instead, it made me want to believe him. That was the most dangerous part of all. Lena opened the rear passenger door. Warm air spilled from inside the SUV, carrying the faint scent of leather and rain. Adrian held my gaze another second. You can keep arguing with me, he said quietly. Just do it from inside the car. I stood there, caught between instinct and fear, then climbed in because for the first time in my life, trusting a dangerous man felt safer than trusting the night outside. The city blurred past in streaks of gold and black beyond the tinted window. Familiar streets turned strange by the silence inside the SUV. I sat rigid against the leather seat, my apron still on, my name tag still pinned to my chest, as if some part of me believed I was going to clock back in and finish my shift once this absurd detour was over. Adrian got in beside me, not too close, not far enough for me to forget he was there. Lena took the front passenger seat, and one of the men from the loading bay slid behind the wheel without saying a word. The doors shut with a soft, final sound that made my stomach tighten. Then we pulled away from Bellamy's, and with every passing block, the life I understood felt farther behind me. For the first 3 minutes nobody spoke. Midtown traffic still moved in its usual restless rhythm. Horns in the distance, red taillights stacking at intersections, steam curling up from a street grate like the city itself was exhaling secrets. I stared at my reflection in the glass and barely recognized the girl looking back. My ponytail had slipped loose. My lipstick was gone. My eyes looked too bright, too alert, like fear had polished them from the inside. Say something, I said finally, because the quiet had started to feel intentional. Adrian turned his head toward me. What would you like to know first? Anything true. The answer came so quickly it almost surprised me. Did I really hear something important? Or are you using that to scare me into cooperating? You heard enough to become inconvenient. That is not comforting. It was not meant to be. I pressed my palms together to keep them from shaking. What was on that phone? Adrian watched me for a second before answering. A shipment. A location. Timing. And a detail that tied it to someone who has been pretending to be loyal to me. The words landed. Harder than I expected. To you. He held my gaze. Yes. I let out a breath that felt thin and uneven. So this is not just rich men acting creepy in a restaurant. No. And those men upstairs? Were not there for the food. I looked down at my apron pocket, where the phone still rested like a live wire. Then why not just take it from me the second you saw it? Because the men watching you were also watching me, he said. If I moved too quickly, they would have known exactly how much I cared. I looked at him sharply. Cared about what? About getting you out before they changed their minds. That answer sat between us, heavier than it should have. He did not say it like a line. He said it like fact, and somehow that was worse. I looked away first. Outside we turned downtown, then west, the traffic thinning as the buildings shifted from bright towers to darker stretches of brick and glass. Where are we going? I asked again. Adrian glanced toward the front, then back at me. A safe place. That still sounds like something a kidnapper would say. Lena made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had stayed in the room longer. Adrian's mouth moved slightly at one corner. If I were kidnapping you, Chloe, I would not have let you keep your sarcasm. Maybe you do not know how to take hostages. Maybe, he said quietly. I know exactly how frightened you are, and I am trying not to make it worse. That shut me up for a second because the thing I hated most was that he was right. He had not raised his voice once. He had not touched me more than necessary. He had not treated me like I was stupid, only uninformed, and somehow that made him more dangerous, not less. Men who wanted control usually made a show of it. Adrian did not need to. The car slowed at a red light. On instinct, I glanced into the side mirror and saw a dark sedan 2 cars back. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just another black car in Manhattan, which was like saying rain was just weather. But then the sedan turned when we turned. My pulse kicked hard. Adrian followed my line of sight without moving much. "Do not panic," he said, too calm to be casual. "Why would you say that unless there is a reason?" His eyes stayed on the mirror for one beat, then came back to me. "Because," he said softly, "we are no longer alone." The driver did not speed up. That was the first thing that scared me. In movies, danger always looked loud. Tires squealed. Engines roared. People shouted into phones and made sudden turns that announced panic to the whole world. But our driver only adjusted his hands on the wheel and kept moving with the same steady precision as before. Like the dark sedan behind us was not a surprise but a variable. Adrian shifted beside me, one hand resting lightly on his knee, the other reaching for the phone mounted low near the center console. He did not dial. He touched the screen once, and whatever he saw seemed to confirm something he had already assumed. "How long?" Lena asked without turning around. "Since 52nd, the driver said. His voice was calm too. Everyone in this car was calm. I hated them for it. "You said not to panic," I whispered, keeping my eyes on the mirror. "That usually means panic is appropriate." Adrian looked at me. "Fear is appropriate. Panic is expensive." That sounds like something printed on a billionaire's coffee mug. Lena made that almost laugh sound again. Adrian ignored it. "Listen to me," he said. His voice lower now meant only for me. "If they keep following us, we change route. If they get closer, we change vehicles. If they disappear, we assume they are trying something smarter. None of that requires you to do anything except stay with me." I turned to face him fully. "Stay with you where?" "Until I know who gave your name." "You already said the phone connects to someone pretending to be loyal to you." "Yes. So you know enough." "I know enough to distrust what looks obvious." His eyes were impossible to read in the dark interior of the SUV. All that blue gone, shadowed and colder now. "What I do not know yet is whether you were seen as a witness, a liability, or an opportunity." The last word hit different. Opportunity for what? Leverage. My throat went dry again. "Against you." "Yes. That is insane. You are in a car with me because men you have never met are interested in where you live. I think we are past insane." I wanted to argue, but the mirror kept pulling my gaze back. The sedan was still there, still keeping distance, still matching us turn for turn with patient confidence. Outside, the city had changed again. We were farther downtown now, passing darker storefronts, apartment towers with lit windows stacked like lives I could almost imagine stepping into. Normal lives where women finished work, ordered takeout, and worried about exams instead of leverage. I thought about my apartment in Queens, my roommate probably wondering why I had not texted back, my anatomy notes spread across the kitchen table under the cheap lamp that buzzed when it got too hot. The life I had at 9 o'clock tonight already felt like it belonged to someone else. "My roommate," I said suddenly. "Mia is home alone." Adrian's attention sharpened. "Address." I stared at him. "You want me to just tell you where I live? I want to make sure no one else gets frightened because of tonight." "That is not the same thing." "No," he said quietly. "It is better." I should have refused. Every survival instinct I had built from years of being a woman in a city told me not to hand a powerful man my address in the back of a black SUV. But another instinct, newer and colder, told me he was already the reason no one else had found it first. I gave him the address. He repeated it once to Lena. She sent a text without comment. A second later, Adrian's phone lit with a message. He read it, then slid the screen dark. "Someone will be nearby within 6 minutes. He said. "Mia will not be alone tonight." Relief came so fast it almost hurt. "Why are you doing this?" I asked before I could stop myself. He looked out the window for a moment, the city lights moving across his face in brief gold and silver flashes. "Because this started on my watch," he said. "And because I do not like innocent people paying interest on other men's mistakes." The sedan behind us closed the distance by half a car length. The driver's hands tightened almost invisibly on the wheel. Lena touched the earpiece hidden beneath her hair. Adrian's voice did not change when he gave the next instruction. "Take the bridge," he said. "Let us see how committed they are." The bridge rose ahead of us in a wash of steel and cold white lights, the river below black as spilled ink, and for the first time since I got into Adrian's SUV, I understood that this night was not bending back toward normal. It was only moving deeper into something I did not have a name for. The city skyline stretched behind us in glittering lines, beautiful and distant, like it belonged to people with simpler problems. I kept my eyes on the side mirror, on the dark sedan that had now committed itself fully by following us onto the bridge. There was no traffic excuse anymore. No coincidence left to hide behind. They are still there, I said, even though everyone in the car already knew. Yes, Adrian said. He did not look at the mirror this time. He looked at me. Which means you need to hear this now. Something in his voice made me turn away from the window. The quiet inside the SUV shifted. Lena lowered the screen on her phone. Even the driver seemed to listen without seeming to. Adrian rested his forearm along the seat between us, not touching me, just close enough that I could feel the shape of his attention. The message you saw was connected to a warehouse in Red Hook, he said. A place used for shipments that are supposed to move quietly. Tonight was not the shipment. Tonight was the confirmation. A name was attached to it. What name? I asked. He held my gaze for a second too long. Mine. I stared at him. Then why would they care that I saw it? If your name was already on the phone, then clearly they know who you are. Because it was not supposed to be connected to me in writing. I do not understand. Someone inside my operation is either careless or disloyal, he said. Possibly both. That message should never have existed in a form that could be picked up by anyone outside a closed circle. And I picked it up. Yes. By accident. The people following us do not care about your intentions. I let that sink in, then felt anger rise where panic had been sitting all night. Hotter. Cleaner. Easier to carry. So what exactly is your plan? I asked. Keep me in a moving car until sunrise? Hide me in some penthouse while you decide whether I am a witness or a bargaining chip. Adrian's expression did not harden. If anything, it went quieter. My plan is to keep you breathing, keep your roommate protected, and figure out who inside my world decided a waitress with nursing textbooks deserved to become a problem. You do not get to say it like that. Like what? Like I just wandered into bad luck. I heard my own voice sharpen. This is your world. Your people. Your problem. I did not ask to be dragged into it. I know. Do you? I shot back. Because from where I am sitting, you sound very comfortable with crisis. Lena looked out the windshield with sudden interest, the universal expression of someone deciding not to interfere. Adrian did not flinch. Comfortable is not the word. Then what is? He was quiet for one beat. Responsible. That should not have affected me. It should have sounded like a line. But it did not. It sounded worn like a truth he was tired of carrying. I looked away first, angry at him for saying it and angrier at myself for hearing the difference. Outside, the bridge lights flashed rhythmically across the interior, turning his face into pieces of shadow and silver. Tell me something real, I said more quietly. Something you are not editing for my benefit. Adrian's eyes stayed on me. Real? Yes. Real as this, he said. If you had put that phone back down and walked away, they still might have watched you. But once they saw me take an interest, your value changed. Now they have to wonder whether you know something, whether I told you something, whether you matter to me enough to be useful. My chest tightened. Do I? The question left my mouth before I could stop it. Adrian's face did not move, but the air between us did. For 1 second, the noise of the engine, the bridge, the city, all of it seemed to go thin and far away. Then he answered in the same calm voice he had used all night, and somehow that made it worse. Enough that I am not handing you back to the dark just because it would be easier. The sedan behind us shifted lanes. The driver touched the steering wheel with more intention. Lena's phone buzzed once. She read the message and said, "Another car just joined at the south entrance." I turned so fast my shoulder hit the door. Through the rear window, a second set of headlights had appeared, smaller and farther back, but closing. Adrian did not swear. He did not raise his voice. He only leaned forward slightly and said to the driver, "Do not go home." Then he looked at me and added almost gently, "Chloe, I need you to trust me for the next 10 minutes. Even if you hate me for the next 10 years. The SUV left the bridge without slowing, then cut through a maze of side streets I could not have retraced if my life depended on it, which at this point felt less like a figure of speech and more like a scheduling note. Lower Manhattan at night looked different when you were not part of it. Storefronts glowed behind security grates. Apartment windows flickered high above us in warm yellow squares. Delivery bikes flashed past like streaks of motion. Somewhere, normal people were ordering late dinner, brushing their teeth, arguing over laundry. Inside this car, every breath felt measured. Every turn felt chosen. Every second stretched tight. Adrian's last words kept repeating in my head. Trust me for the next 10 minutes, even if you hate me for the next 10 years. I wanted to tell him trust was not a switch you flipped because a beautiful man asked nicely in a moving SUV. But the second pair of headlights behind us made the argument feel smaller than it had a minute ago. Lena's phone stayed in her hand now, the screen lighting her sharp profile and pulses. She spoke quietly into her earpiece, listening more than talking. The driver took another right, then a quick left, then merged into a narrow lane lined with closed warehouses and dark loading docks. The buildings here looked tired and old, bricks softened by years of weather and neglect, their windows mostly black. The river smell drifted in faintly even through the sealed glass, cold and metallic. Where are we? I asked. Not where they expected us to go, Adrian said. That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters right now. I exhaled hard through my nose and looked back. The first sedan had followed us off the bridge, but the second car was the one closing distance now, slipping between traffic with patient determination. I could not see faces through the windshield. Just shape. Just intent. They are getting closer, I said. Yes, Adrian replied, calm as winter. Lena. 2 blocks, she said. Gate is open. The driver tapped the wheel once, a signal or habit, then turned sharply into an alley so narrow I instinctively grabbed the door. Brick rushed close on both sides. Trash bins. Fire escapes. A single flickering security light above a steel gate at the far end. It began to rise before we reached it. I looked from the opening gate to Adrian. Please tell me this is the safe place. Temporary, he said. I am beginning to hate that word. The SUV slipped through the gate just as it cleared the roofline, and for one insane second I thought the closing metal would be enough to end this. Then I saw headlights spill across the alley entrance behind us. One of the cars had made the turn. My pulse jumped so hard it hurt. The driver accelerated into a covered structure that looked abandoned from the outside but very much was not on the inside. The concrete floor was clean. Overhead lights snapped on in sequence as we moved deeper in. Another black vehicle waited near a second exit ramp, engine already running. Out, Lena said, opening her door before our car had fully stopped. Now. Everything happened fast after that, but not chaotically. That was the unnerving part. These people had done this before. Adrian was out first, then turned back for me. He did not grab. He offered his hand once. I took it because I was past pretending independence could save me in a parking structure with 2 strange cars outside. The air hit me cold and smelled like concrete, oil and rain carried in on tires. Behind us, the first steel gate slammed down with a heavy echo. Not relief. Just delay. Move, Adrian said, his voice low and steady. He kept one hand around mine and the other at my back as he guided me toward the waiting car. A door. Somewhere behind us opened. Footsteps. Not rushing. Worse. Deliberate. My body went rigid before my mind could. Adrian felt it instantly. Eyes on me, Chloe. I looked up. Those impossible blue eyes locked on mine, sharp and present and completely without panic. Do not listen to anything except my voice. That is not helping, I whispered. It will. Lena opened the rear door of the second car. The driver from our SUV was already moving toward the edge of the structure with another man I had not even seen until now, both of them creating distance between us and whatever had followed us in. I did not look that way again. I kept my eyes on Adrian because he had asked, because everything else felt like a cliff edge, because somewhere in the last hour his calm had become the only solid thing in a night built entirely from falling. In, he said. I climbed into the new car. Adrian got in beside me, shutting the door just as voices echoed somewhere across the concrete, too far to make out words, close enough to turn my blood cold. The second vehicle moved immediately, angling up the exit ramp on the far side of the structure. I twisted to look through the rear window and saw only fractured light, moving shadows, and the steel grid of the lower level dropping away behind us. No clear danger. No clear safety either. Just escape by degrees. Adrian reached forward, pulled a small bottle of water from the console, and handed it to me. My fingers shook too badly to unscrew the cap at first. He took it back without comment, opened it and returned it to my hands. The simple gentleness of that nearly undid me more than the chase had. I took one swallow then another. "You okay?" he asked. The question was so absurd I almost laughed. Instead I looked at him, at the man who had pulled me out of a restaurant and into a night that no longer felt real, and said the only honest thing I had left. No, his expression changed then, only slightly but enough. Something in it softened, not into weakness, not into apology but into recognition. Like my fear was not inconvenient to him. Like it mattered. "Good," he said quietly. "Stay honest with me. It is safer than pretending." The car shot out onto another street, this one quieter, lined with old industrial buildings and the occasional glowing deli sign. My heartbeat was still too fast. My skin still felt too tight. But the headlights behind us were gone for the moment, swallowed by turns and gates and deliberate people who knew how to vanish. I leaned back against the seat and realized how exhausted I was. Not just tired, hollowed out. Adrian must have seen it because he reached into the compartment beside him, pulled out a clean white handkerchief and held it out to me. I frowned. For what? His gaze dropped to my hand. I followed it and saw a thin red line across my knuckle, probably from broken glass at Bellamy's, something so small I had not noticed it until now. "You are bleeding," he said, so quietly it sounded almost personal. And somehow, in a night full of strangers and lies and engines and fear, that was the first thing that made me feel like he was really seeing me. By the time the car finally slowed, Manhattan looked less like a city and more like a painting someone rich had commissioned to convince themselves they still understood darkness. The streets were quieter here, wider too, lined with polished stone buildings and private entrances that gave away nothing unless you knew what to look for. We turned beneath a discreet overhang with no sign above it, only a pair of glass doors and a doorman who stepped forward the second our headlights touched the curb. He did not look surprised to see Adrian. He looked prepared. That difference was starting to matter to me. The car stopped. Adrian got out first, then held the door for me as if this were a normal arrival, and not the continuation of the strangest night of my life. Cold air slipped under my sleeves as I stepped onto the sidewalk. My legs felt unsteady, partly from fear, partly from the crash after too much adrenaline and not enough oxygen. I had been running on instinct for so long that standing still suddenly felt harder. The doorman opened the glass doors before we reached them. He was older, silver-haired, in a dark suit pressed so perfectly it looked ironed onto him. "Good evening, Mr. Russo," he said. Then he glanced at me, not rudely, not curiously, just enough to confirm I existed. Mississippi. Adrian gave a single nod. "No visitors. No exceptions." "Already done, sir." Already done. Of course it was. Inside, the lobby was all stone floors, warm lighting and quiet money. Not flashy. Worse. Controlled. The kind of place where every line was intentional and every piece of furniture had probably been chosen by someone who considered comfort a form of strategy. There was a low arrangement of white orchids on a black table. A faint scent of cedar in the air. No music. No clutter. Nothing accidental. I became painfully aware of my black server uniform, the apron still tied around my waist, the cheap hair tie slipping from my ponytail, the small line of dried blood on my knuckle now wrapped in Adrian's white handkerchief. I looked like a mistake someone had brought into a museum. Adrian led me to a private elevator at the back of the lobby. No buttons inside except a key panel. He touched a card to it, and the doors closed us in with a soft sound. Only then did I realize Lena was not with us. "Where is she?" I asked, handling what comes next. That answer keeps getting less comforting every time you say something like that. Adrian leaned one shoulder against the wall, watching me with that unreadable calm. "You are very committed to complaining in dangerous situations. It is one of my most stable personality traits." To my surprise, his mouth moved slightly, almost a smile. "Good. Keep it." The elevator rose smoothly, no hum, no jolt, just upward motion so quiet it barely felt real. My reflection in the mirrored wall looked pale now. Too pale. I pressed my lips together and focused on breathing evenly. In for 4. Hold. Out for 6. The same pattern I used before exams, before clinical evaluations, before anything that made my chest go tight. Adrian noticed. He noticed everything. You are trained, he said. I glanced at him. For what? To calm yourself before you break. I looked away. Nursing school. That explains the breathing. And the bad shoes. The elevator doors opened before he could answer. The apartment beyond them did not look like a penthouse in the way movies taught you to expect. There was no ridiculous chandelier, no gold everything, no giant sculpture of ego in the middle of the room. It was worse than that too. Better. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Dark wood. Soft gray furniture. Shelves lined with actual books instead of decorative ones. A kitchen so clean it looked untouched. A fireplace built into a stone wall. Flames low and steady behind glass. Elegant. Expensive. Quiet enough to hear your own heartbeat. I stepped inside slowly, every instinct still half expecting a trapdoor to open under me simply because this night had trained me not to trust beauty. Adrian walked past me, loosened his jacket, and set his phone on the kitchen island. It was the first slightly human movement I had seen from him all evening. Not softer. Just tired around the edges. You can take off the apron, he said. You are off the clock. I stared at him for a second, then untied it with fingers that no longer felt fully connected to me. I folded it automatically because my mother had raised me to respect uniforms even when life did not respect you back. I laid it on the edge of the counter. Adrian watched the whole thing without comment. Is my roommate okay? I asked. Yes. He picked up his phone, checked a message, then looked back at me. Your apartment building has someone outside. Quiet. Professional. Mia is unharmed and still believes you are covering a late shift complication. Relief hit so hard it almost bent me. I braced one hand against the counter. Adrian saw that too. Of course he did. Sit, he said. That was not a suggestion, was it? Not this time. I should have argued just to prove I could. But the truth was my knees felt weak, and the room kept tilting slightly at the edges like my body had finally noticed how close fear had come. I sat on one of the stools at the island. Adrian moved to a cabinet, took out a glass, filled it with water, and set it in front of me. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out a proper first aid kit, and placed it beside the glass. I looked at the white box, then at him. Do all mafia bosses keep antiseptic wipes next to imported whiskey? He opened the kit and took out gauze with clinical precision. Only the organized ones. That was almost funny. Take the win. He came around the island and stopped in front of me, close enough for me to see the faint shadow of exhaustion beneath his eyes for the first time. Not weakness. Not carelessness. Just evidence that he was human under all that control. He held out his hand. Let me see your knuckle. I hesitated, then gave him my hand because somehow after everything else tonight, that felt like the least dangerous thing I could do. His fingers were warm and careful as he unwound the handkerchief. No rush. No unnecessary touch. Just attention, focused and exact. The cut was small, barely more than a scrape, but he cleaned it anyway with the same concentration someone else might have used for a larger injury. You do not have to do that, I said softly. Adrian glanced up at me, blue eyes steady, voice even. Yes, he said. I do. His thumb brushed once across the inside of my wrist as he adjusted the gauze. Not intimate, not careless, just steady. And somehow that tiny point of contact made the whole apartment feel quieter. I watched his hands because it was easier than watching his face. His fingers were clean, precise, the movements economical in a way that suggested habit. Not because he played doctor, but because he had spent enough time around damage to recognize it quickly. That realization sat with me harder than it should have. You disinfect cuts like a person who has done that before, I said. Adrian secured the bandage with one final strip of tape and released my hand. I have. That is vague. That is intentional. I flexed my fingers, surprised by how much better the small cut felt once someone had decided it mattered. Adrian closed the first aid kit, set it aside, and moved back around the island, giving me space without making a show of it. Then he loosened the knot of his tie and pulled it free in one smooth motion. I should not have noticed that. I noticed it anyway. Not because it was seductive, because it was human. It was the first sign all night that the man who had moved through danger like he owned it was still subject to exhaustion like everybody else. You look disappointed, he said. I blinked. What? He folded the tie and laid it beside his phone. Most people expect me to say something dramatic after a long night. You look like you were waiting for better dialogue. Despite everything, a breath of laughter escaped me. Small, thin, real. I think I used up all my dramatic tolerance around the second SUV. Something changed in his expression at that. Not amusement exactly. Relief maybe. As if hearing me sound even a little like myself mattered more than he wanted it to. He opened a cabinet, took out a ceramic mug, then another, then set a kettle on the stove with the quiet competence of someone who knew his own kitchen and preferred doing things himself. Tea? He asked. I stared at him. You are making tea. Yes. While someone inside your operation is betraying you. Yes. And people may still be looking for me. Also yes. He glanced over his shoulder. You strike me as someone who works better with warm hands. I hated how accurate that was. I wrapped my fingers around the glass of water instead, pretending it proved something about my independence. Outside the windows, the river moved like dark silk beneath the city lights. A ferry passed in the distance, white and slow, carrying people who had no idea that up here on some impossible floor above Manhattan, a waitress in a wrinkled black uniform was trying to recalibrate her whole understanding of reality. Tell me about the warehouse, I said. No, the answer came so easily I almost choked on my own indignation. No. Adrian turned off the burner before the kettle could fully boil, like he trusted timing more than sound. Not because I enjoy withholding information. Because half answers are more dangerous than silence, and you are already carrying enough risk for one night. You keep deciding what I can handle. I keep deciding what you need to survive the next 12 hours. That is not the same thing. I know. He brought both mugs to the island, set one in front of me, and only then met my eyes. But until I know who is moving against me, it is the priority. The tea smelled like chamomile and mint, impossibly gentle for a room holding this much tension. I wrapped both hands around the mug and let the heat soak into my palms. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The apartment was so quiet I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock near the bookshelves. Somewhere in another room, a phone vibrated once and stopped. The city beyond the glass kept shining like none of this mattered. You said my value changed because you stepped in, I said at last. Adrian's gaze stayed on mine. Yes. Then why did you? It was the question underneath every other question. Why touch my wrist? Why tell me to smile? Why pull me out? Why take responsibility for a stranger when responsibility in his world clearly came with interest? He looked down at his own untouched tea for a second, then back at me. Because the men watching you had already made a decision. You do not know that. I do. How? His jaw shifted once, the smallest fracture in all that composure. Because I know the type of men who think fear makes them efficient. The words were simple. The weight behind them was not. I studied his face then, really studied it, and noticed things I had missed under the pressure of the night. The faint line beside his mouth that suggested restraint came hard, not easy. The tiredness at the edges of his eyes. The scar near his right temple, barely visible unless the light caught it. Evidence. Not of softness. Of history. My pulse slowed a little, enough for curiosity to rise where fear had been sitting all evening. So what now? I asked. Now you stay here tonight. That sounds less like a suggestion and more like house arrest. Call it protective inconvenience. Do you rehearse these lines? Only for difficult guests. I should not have smiled. I did. Just barely. Adrian saw it and looked away first, almost as if that tiny victory unsettled him more than the sedans had. Then his phone lit on the counter. He picked it up, read one message, and all the air in the room changed. No raised voice. No visible alarm. Just the sudden stillness of a man whose instincts had been confirmed. What? I asked, setting down the mug. Adrian's eyes lifted to mine, colder now, sharper. The phone from Bellamy's was wiped remotely 3 minutes ago, he said. And whoever did it knew exactly where to look. The words landed between us with a quiet that felt louder than shouting. I stared at Adrian, my fingers tightening around the warm ceramic mug, until the heat started to sting. Wiped remotely, I repeated. You mean erased? Yes. He set his phone down with impossible care, like breaking the screen would have been easier than absorbing what it meant. The device is now useless. Then why does that change your face like that? His eyes flicked to mine, and there it was again, that unnerving precision, the sense that he had already run through 5 outcomes and disliked every one of them. Because the person who wiped it did not just know the phone was missing. They knew it had left Bellamy's. I felt my stomach drop. Which means someone was watching more closely than I hoped. Inside the restaurant? Possibly. Inside your circle? Definitely. He did not soften the answer. He did not dress it up for my comfort. I appreciated that and hated it at the same time. I pushed the mug away and slid off the stool, too restless to stay seated, too wound up to pretend tea and gauze and warm lighting had made anything safe. The penthouse suddenly felt different. Less like shelter. More like a beautifully designed pause. I moved toward the windows, wrapping my arms around myself as I looked out at the river. The city glittered back, all distance and indifference. Somewhere down there, Bellamy's had probably closed for the night. Chairs stacked. Lights dimmed. Floors mopped. My section wiped clean like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, my whole life had been rearranged by a phone I had touched for one careless second. Tell me the part you are still not saying, I whispered. Adrian did not answer immediately. I turned. He was standing on the other side of the island, one hand braced on the counter, shoulders squared, expression gone still in a way that no longer fooled me. Stillness with him was not absence. It was containment. The part one I'm not saying, he replied at last, is that the phone being wiped this quickly means the breach is closer than I wanted to believe. Closer to what? To me. That is not specific enough. It is all I have right now. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. That keeps happening. He watched me carefully. Chloe. No, I shook my head before he could continue. You do not get to use that voice like it solves things. What voice? The one that sounds calm enough to make everyone else feel unreasonable. Something flickered in his eyes, not anger, not surprise, maybe recognition. You are not unreasonable. Then stop acting like I should just adapt to this. I took a breath that did nothing to steady me. I was serving drinks 3 hours ago. I was worried about my pharmacology quiz and whether my manager would cut my shift next week because I asked for Saturday off. Now I am in a penthouse with a man whose name makes strangers change their posture. And you are telling me someone inside your world knows too much about where I have been tonight. Adrian came around the island slowly, not crowding me, not trying to interrupt the spiral with touch or command. Just presence. I know. Do you? My voice cracked on the word, and I hated that more than anything. Because every time you say that, it sounds like sympathy from 30,000 feet. He stopped a few feet away. Near enough to matter. Far enough to let me leave if I wanted to, even though we both knew I had nowhere useful to go. Then I will say something else, he said quietly. I should have recognized the pattern sooner. I should have assumed Bellamy's was being watched the second the message failed to reach its intended person. I should have moved you out faster. I stared at him. You are apologizing. I am taking responsibility. Those are not always the same thing. Tonight they are. The room went very still after that. The kind of stillness that made you hear everything. The low hiss of the fireplace. The distant hum of traffic many floors below. My own breathing too fast, then slower, then uneven again. Adrian's gaze never left my face. He looked tired now in a way he had not let himself look before. Not weak. Just stripped of the extra layer of control men like him probably wore as naturally as a jacket. Why? Me? I asked, and this time I did not mean because I picked up the phone. I meant something more dangerous. Why did he keep choosing this version of the night where I was protected, informed, accounted for? Why me and not the easier answer? He seemed to understand that. His jaw tightened once before he spoke. Because you were frightened and still kept thinking clearly, he said. Because you were being watched and did not yet know why. Because men like the ones following us depend on people deciding a woman in a service uniform does not matter. His voice stayed even, but something in it sharpened. And because I have spent too many years watching other people pay for my enemies. I held his gaze, and for the first time all night, the fear inside me shifted into something else. Not trust. Not yet. But something close to the beginning of it. Then his phone vibrated again on the counter. He did not look away from me right away, and that was somehow the most unsettling thing of all. When he finally picked it up, his expression hardened by degrees. "What?" I asked. Adrian read the message once, then lifted his eyes to mine. "Lena found the server who covered Section 12 after you left," he said. His voice was flat now, controlled down to the millimeter. "He is gone. And he did not leave alone. Gone." The word seemed to echo in the apartment long after Adrian stopped speaking, as if the room itself understood that absence could be more dangerous than presence. I looked at him across the polished floor in warm light and impossible view, and suddenly the penthouse did not feel high above the city anymore. It felt exposed. Like all that glass was an illusion and every shadow below us already knew my name. "The server from my section?" I asked, even though I already knew. Adrian gave a single nod. "Yes. The one who took over my tables after I left Bellamy's." "Yes." I felt my hands curl into fists at my sides. So someone at the restaurant was involved. At minimum, someone was paying attention. "You keep saying things like that instead of saying the worst version out loud." Adrian set his phone down on the counter with more force than he had used all night. Not enough to call it anger. Enough to tell me I had hit something true. "Fine," he said quietly. "The worst version is this. Someone inside Bellamy's either knew which section the phone belonged to or learned it quickly enough to be useful. The man who covered your tables is now missing. The device was erased remotely. 2 cars followed us. That is not bad luck, Chloe. That is coordination." The honesty hit like cold water. I should have wanted softer words. I did not. Soft words would have insulted what this night had already become. I moved away from the windows and back toward the island because standing too close to all that glass suddenly felt foolish. "Then what happens now?" I asked. Adrian did not answer right away. He walked to the far end of the counter, braced both hands against the dark stone, and lowered his head for one brief second. It was such a small movement most people would have missed it. I did not. When he looked up again, the control was back but thinner now. Earned, not effortless. "Now I assume the breach is active," he said. "I assume they know you are with me. I assume they are trying to determine whether keeping you frightened is enough, or whether they need a different approach." "A different approach," I repeated. "You really know how to make a girl miss her old problems." He exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh, almost regret. "I imagine pharmacology now feels charming. At this point, I would marry pharmacology." That got the ghost of a smile out of him, and somehow that made the next silence worse. Because for a second he looked younger. Not by years. By armor. Like the man in front of me had once been allowed to be less careful with his face. Then it was gone. "You should sleep for a few hours," he said. "That is your solution?" I stared at him. "People are erasing phones, disappearing servers, and following cars, and your medical advice is a nap?" "My advice," he said evenly, "is that exhausted people make expensive mistakes. You need rest. I need clarity. We both need the next version of you to still be able to think." I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped because he was right and I hated him for it. My whole body felt wired and drained at the same time, like the fear had burned through everything useful and left only static. Adrian must have seen the exact moment I realized it because his voice softened, not weakly, just enough. "There is a guest room down the hall on the left," he said. "Door locks from the inside. No one enters without your permission. And if I say I do not want to sleep in your apartment at all?" His gaze held mine. "Then I tell you the truth and hope you are too smart to romanticize freedom before morning. That is not exactly comforting. Comfort is not the assignment tonight." I looked at the hallway he had indicated, then back at him. "And what are you going to do? Work? On what?" Finding out who inside my world just turned a waitress into leverage. The way he said waitress should have felt dismissive. It did not. It felt furious on my behalf. And that was somehow more dangerous than if he had sounded cold. I folded my arms not because I was warm, but because I needed something to hold together. You keep saying I matter because of what I saw, I said. But that is not the whole truth anymore, is it? Adrian went still. Truly still. Not the polished stillness he wore in public. Something deeper. More exposed. The fireplace hummed softly behind him. The city lights moved across the windows in distant reflections. My heart started beating harder again, but for a reason that had nothing to do with sedans or erased phones. No, he said at last. The single word landed low and steady. I swallowed. Then tell me the rest. For one suspended second, he looked like a man deciding whether honesty would save either of us or ruin us faster. Then he came around the island and stopped close enough that I had to tilt my head back slightly to keep meeting his eyes. Not touching. Not crowding. Just close enough for truth to stop pretending it was casual. The rest, he said, his voice so quiet I felt it more than heard it, is that I knew this became personal the moment I saw you trying not to show fear in a room full of men who expected you to disappear into the wallpaper. My breath caught. Adrian's expression did not soften, but something in his eyes did. Not sentiment. Recognition. I should have treated you like a liability, he continued. It would have been cleaner, smarter, easier. Instead, I saw you and made the most dangerous decision a man in my position can make. Which was? I asked, though part of me already knew. His gaze dropped briefly to the bandage on my knuckle, then lifted back to my face. I decided your safety mattered to me more than the convenience of distance. The apartment went silent around us. No city. No fireplace. No clock. Just the quiet aftermath of a sentence that changed the shape of the room. I did not know what to do with that kind of honesty, especially from a man who had spent the entire night speaking in measured fragments. Adrian, I said, and his name sounded different now. Less like a warning. More like a threshold. His jaw shifted once, and for the first time all night I saw real strain in him, not from danger outside, but from whatever it cost him to stand there and say something unguarded. Get some sleep, Chloe, he said softly, because by morning this gets harder. And I would rather face that with you angry and rested than brave and exhausted. He stepped back then, just enough to return the air between us, and I hated the absence instantly. He picked up his phone again, already turning toward the part of the night that still belonged to strategy and betrayal and names I did not know. I should have gone to the guest room exactly then. I should have taken the escape hatch he was offering in clean sheets and a locked door. Instead I stood where I was, watching the man who had pulled me out of danger become the center of it again, and understood something I had been trying not to name. The fear was still there. The danger was still real. But somewhere between Bellamy's and this penthouse, the line between surviving him and trusting him had started to disappear. I did not sleep. I tried. I made it as far as the guest room door, as far as the quiet bed and the folded blanket at the foot of it and the soft lamplight that should have felt safe, but safety had become too abstract to trust. So I stood by the window instead, still. In my black uniform, still wearing the bandage Adrian had wrapped around my knuckle, and watched the river move through the dark like time refusing to stop for anybody. Somewhere beyond the closed door, I could hear the low murmur of Adrian's voice once, then silence, then the distant click of a glass set down on stone. He was still awake. Of course he was. Men like him probably did not sleep when betrayal was in the room, even if the room was 40 stories above the city and lined with expensive books. I do not know how much time passed before I opened the guest room door again, only that the apartment outside had gone deeper into night. The fireplace still burned low. The kitchen lights were dimmed. Adrian stood near the windows with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled once at the forearms, one hand in his pocket, the other holding his phone at his side. He looked like someone built for control and forced to wear fatigue like a badly tailored second skin. He turned the second I stepped into the room, as if some part of him had been listening for me the whole time. You should be asleep, he said. You should stop saying that like it is a simple thing. He studied me for one quiet beat, then nodded once as if he accepted the truth without needing to win the point. Fair. I crossed the room slowly, the wooden floor cool beneath my shoes, and stopped near the island where my untouched tea had gone cold. Any news? I asked. Adrian looked down at the phone in his hand, then placed it face down on the counter like he did not want the night to own even one more second than it already had. Enough to confirm the breach is internal, he said. Not enough to put a name on it yet. But you have a suspicion. Several. And I am guessing that is not comforting either. No, I leaned back against the counter and folded my arms, more for steadiness than warmth. So what happens in the morning? Adrian turned toward me fully then, the city lights cutting pale silver across one side of his face. In the morning I move you somewhere quieter. Somewhere even fewer people know about. You say that like I am luggage. No, he said softly. I say it like you are still in danger. The honesty in his voice stole the sarcasm from my mouth before I could use it. For a second neither of us spoke. The apartment was too still, the kind of stillness that made every truth sound larger. I looked at him, really looked, and saw not just power this time, not just the impossible composure or the expensive restraint, but the cost of carrying both. He had spent the whole night making decisions that protected me. Not perfect decisions. Not gentle ones. But deliberate. Constant. Real. Back at Bellamy's, I said quietly, when you told me to pretend, did you already know it would end like this? Adrian's gaze held mine. No. Then why did you do it? He let out a slow breath, almost inaudible. Because I saw you look at that phone and then try to act like your hands were not shaking. My pulse stumbled. He went on before I could answer. Because you were frightened and still trying to think. Because the men watching you had already decided you were easier to erase than explain. And because the moment I touched your wrist, I knew walking away was no longer an option I could live with. The words settled over me with the same dangerous softness as the night itself. I should have stepped back. I should have protected whatever clear line still existed between his world and mine. Instead I stayed where I was, looking at the man who had turned my life upside down, and then stood in front of the falling pieces like he meant to keep them from cutting me. So what are we now? I asked before fear could stop me. Still pretending? Adrian went still in that deep way he had, the way that meant the truth was arriving before he had decided whether to allow it. Then he took one step closer. Not enough to trap me. Enough to change the air. His eyes dropped briefly to the bandage on my hand, then rose back to my face, and when he spoke, his voice was low and steady and far too honest for the hour. I lied about one thing, Chloe, he said. The danger was real. But none of the moments with you were. My breath caught so sharply it almost hurt. Adrian's expression did not soften into romance or ease or anything simple enough to survive the night cleanly. Stayed what he was. Controlled. Intense. Unavoidably certain. You should have been a stranger I protected and forgot, he continued. Instead, somewhere between the restaurant and this room, I stopped wanting distance. The city glittered behind him like a witness that would never testify. I felt the floor beneath me, the cooling tea at my side, the bandage on my knuckle, the strange terrible steadiness in my own heartbeat as it adjusted to a new kind of fear. Not fear of him. Fear of what it meant that I believed him. That is a terrible thing to say to a woman who has not slept, I whispered. Something almost like warmth moved at the corner of his mouth, gone as quickly as it came. Probably, he said. But I am finished pretending. I should have had a clever answer for that. I should have guarded the last of my common sense like it was something precious. Instead I looked at him and understood the simplest truth of the whole night. He had pulled me into danger with one hand and shielded me from it with the other. He was the storm and the shelter both. And the worst part was that I no longer knew which one scared me more. Then his phone lit on the counter again, bright against the dark stone, dragging the world back into the room. Adrian glanced at the screen, and every line of him changed. Not panic. Not surprise. Recognition. What is it? I asked. His gaze lifted to mine, and the answer landed like the opening note of another, deeper disaster. Whoever betrayed me, he said quietly, just asked for proof that you are still alive.